To fold the pivot housing, we will use both sheets of two of the remaining rectangles. We want a larger rectangle and a smaller rectangle. We will use the smaller rectangle to fold the larger rectangle first. We place the smaller rectangle up near the top. You notice that I don't place it so it matches the edge across there. You want it so that it is longer across this edge. So it is across the 4-inch edge. And you want to match the top. Fold the bottom line up to meet the smaller rectangle. Slip the smaller rectangle into the larger rectangle and fold around the smaller rectangle. Flaps on the larger rectangle will actually overlap a little bit. Open this up, fold to the existing line on the bottom, and refold. Turn around, repeat the process on the other side. This forms the outside pivot housing. For the inside pivot housing, we are going to match the width of this paper. We begin by placing the outside housing along the top edge. Fold up to meet the bottom of the housing. This time we're not going to fold around as we did before because that would make this one a little bit bigger. We're going to actually put it on the edge and match the two edges. We open it up, we fold up to the bottom edge and fold over. Turn around, fold up to the existing line and fold over. This is our inside pivot housing. We slip one housing inside the other, locating it about in the center. We're going to make a small crease along the edge. I wouldn't make it too sharply because you may want to adjust that later on when you attach it to a prism. We're now ready to insert the pivot. We take our pivot, we open up one end of the housing, we slip our pivot inside the smaller housing and slide it down so it nests in the housing, in the outside housing. We now bring our edge down and insert it between the two edges of the pivot. We refold our outside edge, capturing the pivot in the housing. This is for one side. You may want to move the housing. Hold the paper loosely. Do not hold it tightly. You do not want to bend the paper when you do this. And see if you can move the pivot around. You may find that it moves smoothly in one direction but not so smoothly in another direction. That's okay. We're now ready to do the same process on the other two remaining rectangles. Now we're ready to complete the pivot housing on the other side. We repeat the process we had before. Remember that you don't want it to line up on both edges there. You want to have the smaller edge, smaller side with the long side of the smaller pivot housing. You match the lines across the top on the pivot housing, folding up to meet the edge, bottom edge of the smaller pivot housing. Nest the smaller pivot housing in the larger pivot housing. Fold the top down around the smaller pivot housing. Open it up. Fold over to meet the first line and fold over again. Repeat on the other side to complete the larger pivot housing. We're going to use this as a guide to fold this pivot housing. We again match the top line, fold up to match the bottom. This actually centers the pivot housing. This time, however, remember that you want to have it exactly the same size as the other pivot housing. So to complete the fold, we match the bottom lines and we fold over to match the top edges. Then we open up, fold to the existing line and fold over. Open up, fold to the existing line and fold over. Insert pivot housing, the smaller pivot housing into the larger pivot housing. I do not want to just yet fold this over until I can nest it with the existing folds. You may want to fold over a little bit of a line there loosely so it's a little bit easier to handle. You slide the two pivot housings together, capturing the pivot on the top. Notice how I've captured the pivot. Now I bring out that remaining edge and fold it around, capturing the pivot on the top. Refold the loose folds along the edge. Let's see how it rotates. This time you want to test it in both directions. You will notice that it should flow smoothly in both directions. This completes the pivot housing.